So I must disagree with my respectful colleague on several counts. First of all, I don't think that cybersecurity and information security are equal. I think that cyber world, protecting the information, the data, but also the assets are much more complex. Because when I talk about cybersecurity, I'm also talking about protecting systems that are controlled by the cyber. For example, nuclear plants and so on and so on. So it's not just the information. Second, because of in the past where we have the information installed on-premise and not connected via the cyber world, via the internet or not in cloud, things are much easier because it was within the wall of your organization. Now, the walls of your organization don't exist anymore because the data of your organization is spread all over the world and is accessed from everywhere. And everybody wants to access it from BYOD, from your own devices, from your smartphones or whatever have you. So the order, the complexity of the problems that we are facing now in the cyber world are order of magnitude than the problem that we had when it was just information security. So that's one thing that I don't agree with you. And I think that in order to approach it, we have to understand that the ecosystem of the cyber crime. And cybercrime, the cyber industry, I'm not talking about the solution, I'm talking about the criminals, I'm talking about the people that are manufacturers, the malware. This is like a mirror image of the legitimate industry. So we have people, we have technologists, I'm a technologist. So there are technologists in the underworld that are developing software. There are people, there are marketeers here in the audience. I can tell you that there are marketeers in the underworld that are marketing the malware and the other crimeware that is being developed. And there are people that are dealing with infrastructure, so the whole complex world. Therefore, the old way to attack information security problems doesn't hold anymore. You cannot assume that your servers will be clean. You cannot assume that the endpoint, whatever is it, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone or whatever other device is clean. You must assume that everything is contaminated. Therefore, the new way to approach it has to be a holistic approach. In the same way that when we protect a country, we have the infantry and we have the Air Force and we have the Navy, but you also have the intelligence. When we build an effective anti-cybercrime solution, we have to do with the same thing. Obviously, we need to have the best products. And if you heard Yerushalmi talk before about big data, of course, big data must be used in cybersecurity. But this is not enough. You also need to be proactive. You need to know what is the enemy, and the enemy can be someone that wants to attack a bank, or someone that wants to attack the infrastructure of the cyber infrastructure of your country. What are they preparing? Therefore, you have to have very good intelligence systems and intelligence people, both what we call human int and SIGINT, that know what are the attacks that are going to be against you. And only effective holistic system that also deal with complex information sharing can be effective against these day attacks.
So, you know, at the end of the day, when I came to my organization, I've asked, what are the measurements to ensure that I'm on the right path? Meaning, I have close to zero customer impacted. I have less and less money coming out of my bank to hackers. I know that the response time is very quick, and there are a list of measurements, and I haven't done yet the analysis with my team, but right now I'm not sure we are going in the right direction. I was hoping that as we move forward, we will have more solution, and those measurements will be better and better, or the result of the measurements. I'm aware that the attackers have easier life. I mean, for them to attack is very easy. For us to defend is very complicated. So I'm sure there is no magic solution, but I was hoping to hear something very innovative. Here is something that we can do and we're not doing, or we are planning to do.
Well, one of the problems that we have in general in the whole system is that there's so many gray and black areas in the overall infrastructure that give the equivalent of a safe haven. So we have many, many Afghanistans in the cyber world that allow somebody to attack you without any kind of impunity. And actually the biggest one is small businesses with websites, which is quite interesting because you can use regular laptop PCs quite well to do denial of service attacks, but they're not very good to attack a company. But if I hijack a website of a small business who doesn't care if the website is compromised or not compromised, I have a really solid footing and a pretty big pipeline from which I then can propagate attacks. And so one of the things that we really have to think about is how can I secure the overall infrastructure? How can I make sure that we don't have like a company which just invested at 6scan that did a test of the sites that they tested, and those who have WordPress, which is a fairly common blogging platform, about 30% were out of date or had out of date plugins. That means 30% of those, anybody with even rudimentary skills could take over the site and can use it as a jumping off platform to attack you or other businesses and things like that. So one of the really, really critical things is we have to start to take the overall infrastructure more seriously and have to secure every single aspect of it. And there's a lot of companies in Israel and otherwhere who are actually doing that. And there's a big obligation of the ISPs too, that they actually have particularly the small business customers and help them to secure the sites.
Well, overall security is not the solution. And why I say so is because complex infrastructure is very expensive to secure and very hard to secure. As an attacker tries to steal information or change information or disrupt the information flow, it has a few points of attacking. Once you try to defend it, okay, at this exact point of defense, it will be cheaper and more targeted defense.
I think this leads to another question maybe. So, and I mentioned it in my opening discussion, so where do we want to be? Reactive, active, proactive?
Well, I think if you do reactive things, which you have to have, I mean, you got to have some kind of disaster plan for your business, just if you have a cyber attack as well as any other disasters. But if you're reactive, one of the problems is you never know what you lost. And so if anybody, I mean, how many people here had a virus on their computer at one point in their online life? Can you see hands? Yeah, so every single detail on your computer at that point is compromised. You don't know what the virus took out. You don't know who got the data. You don't know who got your credentials to your banking account. And yet probably most of you didn't shut down your bank account. Most of you didn't change your passwords in every site and so on. So the problem is with being reactive is the damage that has happened is impossible to assess, or almost impossible to assess. We make estimates, we look at logs, but even the logs can be deleted. So reactive is a last line of defense. And actually there's a company called Last Line that exactly does that. But the core has to be proactive. You got to keep people out of your systems, and you got to structure your systems in a way that you limit the damage to start with.
Yeah, just one for the definitions. I know that most of us today are active. We were reactive in the past. By saying proactive, I mean, do we want to attack back? Or do we want to generate an attack?
So, several things. First of all, I think that we have to separate between proactive and offensive. I think what your question was not about being proactive, which I think all of us agree that you need to be proactive. You said if you want to be offensive, okay? So I leave that question for, sometimes you don't have a choice, you have to be offensive, but you always have to be proactive, okay? Because you have to make sure that you prepare for the attacks that are relevant to you. That's one thing. But one very important thing, which is almost orthogonal to the question whether reactive or proactive or offensive, is that security is an enabler, okay? Security system, and even more so in a cybersecurity, where we are Generation X, and they will not tolerate any harming of the user experience. Security cannot be disabler to this business. If the security system are such that Facebook is not fun anymore, then the security system failed. Okay? And doesn't go for Facebook, but for Microsoft and Google and everything else. Okay? So that's why security system has to be like the brakes in the car. We can drive to 180 kilometers. I mean, we are not allowed to, but we can drive very fast because we have very effective system to stop, right? We just stop on the brake and it stops. It doesn't harm us driving experience. But if the brakes in the car were like putting a wall instead of the car, we would not drive the car, okay? So security systems, the new generation security systems have not only, they have to be very effective and do all the things that we described before, but they have to be almost seamless and not harm the user experience. And that's why they have to be very smart. They have to make sure that they learn your profile, that they understand what is normal to you and what is abnormal to you. And that's why we need to apply big data analytics, very sophisticated analytics engines. We have to apply machine learning, because we cannot just write rules like the old way, the old-fashioned security. The system has to adapt to the new threat on one hand, but it has to adapt to your changing lifestyle and make sure that it learns it and doesn't bother you, but still keeps you secure.
You mentioned also just one, and then I'll let the guy, is around the third-party attack. So when I'm under an attack, a third party, so you can basically attack for me. So can you elaborate around that? So not directly, so if I'm under attack, instead of me trying to attack back my attacker, I engage somebody else.
Oh, of course, that happens many times. It's, but we are living in a very specialized world, okay? So for example, if you're a banker, you specialize in finance, okay? You're not specialized in attack, okay? So we'll hire someone that's specialized in attacks and someone that's specialized when you want to attack someone, whatever is your target. And obviously when you want to defend yourself, you will hire an expert in defense. So most of the time it will be a third party. And that's why, by the way, the cloud, I will say that in the future, and we see the tendency, more and more businesses will move their data to the cloud. Why? Because the expertise to defend your data will be so demanding that not everybody will have it. Then most likely you will use a cloud provider that you know that he or she or the company are expert in defending your assets, and you know that you cannot do it yourself.
Okay, thanks.